And call this work session to order. Work session on SAP pay error settlements. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. We'll start over here.
Jason Bockenstedt, Deputy Chief of Staff for the Mayor.
Felix Rivera.
Meg Zalato.
John Bidelton.
Pete Peterson.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Becky Wynn Pearson, Municipal Attorney.
We also have Crystal Kennedy on the phone. And then we should be joined soon by Assembly members Austin Quinn Davidson, Christopher Constant, and I think that's it. So as I explained on Friday to the members, I don't schedule work sessions on Monday or Tuesday unless there are extraordinary circumstances. On top of that, I pledged to not schedule any meetings past today. So Mr. Falsey assured me that this work session fits the definition of extraordinary circumstances and should occur before Thursday. So we are here today. Thank you all for your flexibility. I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Bockenstedt to get us started.
Thank you. And as Bill indicated last week, we were very near to the point where we could release these as we have settled our outstanding SAP grievances with all of the unions except for one minor issue that is still outstanding with one of them, but we believe that we could move forward with both providing this information to you and to the public. So I think what I'm going to do is take us back, probably run through some of this relatively quickly. It's information that you guys have seen, but wanted to provide kind of the history and the context to a lot of this. Oh no. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Looks very good with large crayons. Oh, man has a bow tie.
My computer is just frozen.
Yeah, mine is also having an issue. We're in the beginning of trying. Yeah, it's frozen. That's why it froze while it was sending it.
Let the record reflect we're having technical difficulties.
I see that.
Did it go? Okay.
Do we need to maybe just turn the TV on and off?
I think it's my computer more than the TV, because I can't even get my mouse.
Can you turn off your?
You can't turn it off and turn it on, that doesn't solve it.
Well, that solves about 90% of issues, just turning it on and off.
Maybe that worked. Maybe it's working now.
Yeah.
All right, here
You
we go.
fixed it. Thank you.
All you needed to do was be in the room.
Take that off. It's obscene.
So SAP, everyone kind of knows about that. But we, to just kind of run through, we have 9 municipal unions. We have AMA, APDEA, IFF, IBEW, Local 302, the operating engineers, Local 71, the plumbers and steam fitters, I think they are now. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And Teamsters. So as you have probably seen this many times, all of us got very used to this form after we went live with SAP. It is the pay correction form that we saw a ton of. And this is kind of the same similar chart that you have seen in the past. We have kind of the first 4 months prior to going live with SAP where we still experience with PeopleSoft, in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 payroll errors every month. But as you can see, the first couple of months after we went live with SAP, we were up over 1,000 payroll errors. We have made significant progress to the point where we are now. The 35 is through the first half of September, so we had about another 35 the second half, so we were at about 70. And I can tell you through conversations with a few of the unions, APDEA being one of them, that this last pay cycle, APDEA only experienced 17 pay errors, which they said was fewer than they were experiencing in the PeopleSoft time frame. So for at least one, we have made very significant progress, and I think anecdotally we are seeing that kind of through a lot of the other unions. But as a result of all of this, within all of the collective bargaining agreements, there is penalty language for late pay. And I'll run through some of these just really quickly. For AMEA, it's $60 for each day after the first payroll period that has not been corrected. And again, a lot of these have been around since the mid-70s, the 80s. APDEA is 4 hours of pay for each 24-hour period thereafter. IAFF, it's $50 a day. IBEW, it's $50 a day. For IBEW techs, it's $25 a day. Local 302, it's 8 hours of straight time pay for every day. Local 71 is $75 for each calendar day, and the Teamsters is 8 hours of straight time pay. And just so you know, execs and non-reps, there is no language that applies to them. So just keep that in the back of your head. So kind of just see what everyone, when we stepped into this is the language that we were dealing with as we were trying to struggle with figuring out how do we solve this issue.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
So 8 hours of straight time per day, how much dollars is 8 hours of straight time? I know it's a range.
I mean, it depends on the employee and what their kind of factored rate of pay is.
They're probably $25 to $40 an hour, so you're talking about
$150 a day.
plus a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under PeopleSoft, there were 50 to 100 pay errors a month. And then we saw what happened after SAP. How many of those PeopleSoft errors had a pay penalty involved? Do you know offhand?
I think occasionally we did, but I think we had been using that software for so long that when we get to the numbers of 50 or so, those are, I think, in the realm of where we can fix over the course of a 2-week period, so that we never really accrued penalty pay. Now, did we at certain points? Absolutely, but it was, I think, pretty rare for us to have that.
Thank you.
So where did that kind of leave us? SAP plus the penalty clauses, and what do we do with that? Because if you just kind of look at what the dollar figure is, there was just absolutely no way that the municipality would be able to pay what the actual language said. So the typical way that we have dealt with that is through non-cashable leave. And so what does non-cashable leave actually do? In the main, it just simply means more vacation for individuals. But some things that come out of that is for APD, for example, and I think for most of the unions during these settlements, the non-cashable leave is required to be used first. So what ends up happening is some cashable leave ends up building up, and that can build up over time, and you have to cash that out over time. And also for a few of the unions, it's earlier forced cash out. Some of them have max number of hours of cashable leave that they can carry in any given year. So if they're using a lot more non-cashable leave, the budgets they're required to cash out. But most of this has been managed within existing budgets. I think we've discussed with you the AFD challenge that we had, which is, they had unanticipated expenses, the fire season and all of that. So that seems to be the one department that has had a little bit more challenge than all the others. So I'm going to kind of walk through each of the settlements with each of the unions. I'm not going to go through all of the details. You have those in front of you, but I'll kind of hit the highlighted parts and then kind of talk about the total number of cashable leave hours that were for each of them. So I'll start with Local 302. As I kind of go through these, there's I think the other thing to keep in mind is some of these unions, the number of employees that we're dealing with are quite few versus when we get to IBEW, AMEA, APDEA, where we're talking about several hundred to upwards of 600 in AMEA and APDEA.
Ms. Alatel?
Thank you. So just from a process standpoint, when the pay correction form is filled out, does it then automatically convert to a grievance for represented members?
No.
So how do we get from A to B?
So essentially, within each of the collective bargaining agreements, there is the grievance process, and I may let if somebody from one of the unions would like to kind of explain how that works on their end.
So it goes through the grievance process even after.
And they
the
file
correction?
a grievance that is filed with us, and then there's steps that go through that we either deny it or go through, and I think there's multiple steps that we can go through, but
Okay.
it usually the grievance comes from the union.
Okay, thanks. That's
So for Local 302, it's a much smaller group of folks. But as you can see, for some of them, we were able to actually do lump sum cash payments. That is pretty rare in all of these, but for some of these we were able to just because of the number of employees. But for about 10 of them, they received 40 hours of non-cashable leave. So to settle these three different grievances, we awarded essentially 400 hours of non-cashable leave to members of this union. For AMEA, in two of these, through our own missing of the deadline of responding to the grievance, we had to get an extension and not have an automatic judgment against us. We, for AMEA, gave 8 hours of non-cashable leave to every single AMEA employee so that we would be allowed to stay within or get an extension for our reply. And what it actually looked like when we got there is for all of these members, we provided non-cashable leave for each of these members, and the total amount was roughly 7,500 hours of non-cashable leave for settling this grievance. For IBEW, the technicians, there was actually only one individual, and we had a $100 settlement for them for the tech, but we'll go into the other arm of IBEW a little bit later. The plumbers and steam fitters, for about 70 of the employees that experienced, I believe, the most harm, they received 170 hours of non-cashable leave. The remaining, I believe, roughly 40 employees of the union received 40 hours of non-cashable leave. And as I go through a couple of these, I'll explain them, but one of the clauses in there is any new hire that experiences any new defect would be awarded 4 hours of non-cashable leave on each pay period until the defect was fixed. We have actually not had to award anything based on this for this one. We have had no new employees experience any payroll errors. For this one, if any employee leaves prior to July 1st, 2020, whatever they have left in the non-cashable leave will convert to cashable leave. But post, so if they leave on July 2nd, 2020, if they still have non-cashable leave, they lose it. Any overpayments that folks paid as a result of leaving were refunded, and any overpayments that we were still trying to collect, we stopped collecting those. And then any employee who voluntarily separated received a lump sum payment of $1,500, and for this one it was, I believe, like 3 or 4 employees that left in between this time period. So total number of hours of non-cashable leave equaled about 16,500 hours. For Local 71, again, this is one of the smaller unions. There were only 4 individuals. Each received $1,000 in a lump sum payment and 40 hours of non-cashable leave for a total of 160 hours of non-cashable leave to settle each of these. And I will say that one of the things that, as you'll see up at the top, it's a Veterans Day holiday. One of the problems that we've experienced a lot is with holidays. Because this union is relatively on the smaller side, we were able to kind of get a workaround on this holiday in particular, so we shouldn't have this issue going forward. IFF, the firefighters. The 40-hour employees, so that's mainly your administrative folks. I believe there's about 25 to 30 of those received 120 hours. The dispatch employees received 160 hours, and all of our Kelly shift employees, which are our firefighters, received 216 hours of non-cashable leave. And in this one, there was one individual who was a member of the union but was promoted to a non-rep position prior to this being finalized, and he was given 40 hours of non-cashable leave since he was a part of the union when a lot of this was happening. And then firefighters or members of this union that left prior to this being finalized received 40 hours of cashable leave that was paid out. And again, for this one, I believe the numbers we were looking at were 3 or 4 individuals that left. Again, anyone that leaves prior to December 31st of this year that has any non-cashable leave left over will have to convert it to cashable leave, but post January 1st, 2020, anyone that leaves and has any additional non-cashable leave would lose it, and it would not convert to cashable leave. And again, anyone that had either paid an overpayment or was in the process of paying one had that amount refunded, and we were no longer collecting the overpayment. And then we also reimbursed IFF up to $40,000 for their legal costs. So the total hours of non-cashable leave here was about 66,000 when you add everyone together. IBEW. Any employee that has been employed for more than a year received 180 hours, and I believe that's roughly about 200 of IBEW's employees. Anyone that was there for less than a year received 80 hours, and anyone that left prior to this being voluntarily, prior to this being finalized, received 80 hours of non-cashable leave that was paid out as cashable leave. There were a few employees that were with IBEW left and were rehired. If those employees had less than a year of cumulative service, they received 80 hours. If they had more than 1 year, there were 180, and I believe that we're talking about just a handful of folks that would fit into that category. And again, this is one of those situations where whatever is left in non-cashable leave when the sale of ML&P goes through, it will be converted to cashable leave, but they're required to use the non-cashable leave first. A little bit more. We also said that we were going to hopefully have all of the errors fixed by the December 27th, 2019 paycheck. If not, then every employee that is still experiencing a payroll error would receive 15 hours of non-cashable leave per paycheck. We are making a lot of progress. We think we're going to miss that deadline by a little bit, but it should hopefully be a very low number of employees that would actually qualify for this, and hopefully soon thereafter we will hopefully have everyone taken care of. Again, as I said, non-cashable leave will be converted to cashable leave at close of the sale to Chugach. And again, anyone that had an overpayment was refunded that, or we stopped collecting an overpayment. So total number of hours of non-cashable leave for IBEW was about 46,000. For APDEA, this is the other union that we missed the filing deadline. So to prevent a judgment entered against us, we had to settle with them to get an extension, and that resulted in us paying 20 hours of non-cashable leave to all APDEA members. And so their ultimate looks like for employees that were hired after June 1st, they received 80 hours. Those between December 1st and June 1st received 160 hours, and any employee that was hired prior to December 1st, 2017 received 400 hours of non-cashable leave. Again, non-cashable leave converted to cashable leave at the time of separation. Anyone that left, we paid $1,500 in a lump sum payment. As we go through the bottom ones, we're talking about a very few number of employees. I think there were 3 or 4 that would qualify for the $1,500. And then we had the same thing that on the IFF, we had one employee that was a union member that was promoted to a non-union position, and he received 300 hours of non-cashable leave. Same as with almost all of these others, the overpayments were refunded, and we stopped collecting. And then APDEA, we paid $163,000 for legal costs, and they also had hired a forensic consultant or accountant for 9 months, and we agreed to pay for that as well. And APDEA and the municipality split the cost that had already been assessed by the arbiter. So for theirs, the total hours of non-cashable leave equated to about 222,000 hours. So again, just wanted to remind everyone, this is the world that we were living in terms of the penalty pay. And going back to kind of the chart, when we look at the number of errors that were there, APDEA, out of all of those, were experiencing about 35 to 40% of them. So they were the union that was experiencing the most harm, and then from there it went down quite significantly between the others. But as we also move through this, we have made a number of changes to a few of these. We have either lessened the amount per day or the number of hours per day, while also providing a longer ramp for us to be able to make any changes when there are changes to the CBA before any penalties would kick in. And for most of them, it ranges from about 90 to 150 days in terms of giving us that leeway before any penalties would kick in. So again, what does non-cashable leave do in Maine? More vacation. But as we will see, it will equate to more cashable leave over time, but that is something that we can deal with over a number of years. It's not something that hits us all at once. And it's just for a couple of years, it's going to be a little bit more forced early cash out. But the two final numbers that I'll leave you with, and take any questions, is if you added up what everyone believed was our paper liability, if you took what each of those penalty clauses had and what would be required to settle if we actually paid out cash, it would equate to about $2.7 billion. And as a result of all of these settlements in terms of non-cashable leave, and we worked very well with all of the unions, they understood that this was just not anywhere in the realm of possibility. We were able to, for a maximum budget impact of roughly $16 million between all of them. So.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 16 million, that includes the value of the non-cashable leave plus the payout?
Correct.
How much is the total payout of lump sum cash?
For a lot of them were of the smaller variety, so I would guess it was in the neighborhood of less than $50,000 total.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we're chilling. Yeah, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the grievance costs from the APDEA, legal and forensic accounting, or actually, first question, the 163,500, does that include the forensic accounting
It does.
costs? It does, okay. And that was the only union that negotiated for the MOA to pay costs
IFF
associated?
did as well.
IFF, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Couple questions. So is the sense among the employees that they kind of got cheated? You owed them $2.7 billion and they got chump change. Are they pissed?
I think it would probably depend on who you talk to. I mean, I think that for some of these, some of the larger unions where we did the global settlements and a lot, we've heard from some employees and we've been told that some of them were like, you gave us way too much. But I think that just depends on what your perspective was and what you were experiencing in terms of your, incorrect paycheck week in and week out for a number of months. I think we all recognize that put a lot of stress and anxiety on individuals, and we ultimately wanted to come to what we believed was a fair resolution of this, and we believe we did.
So there was an article in the paper, and there was a union leader who said that you need punitive penalties here, where there's no incentive for the city to pay properly. So, as an administration, you don't care about paying employees properly without a huge penalty? Is that what to take away?
Obviously, no. I think I went around and I talked to many groups of employees, and they said categorically that one of our highest obligations is to make sure we pay people accurately and on time. And I think there was a recognition that this was a problem not of our own doing, not of our own choice. But as I said many times, we are not at fault here, but we are responsible. And the employees were, for the most part, fairly understanding of that position.
Yeah, my observation is it was the priority, was to fix the pay problem. You went forward. I mean, it took a while. It was tragic, but I sure didn't. I mean, I didn't think there was a thing, oh gosh, we have to do it because we have penalties. We had to do it because it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. And I understand why people might feel that, a different administration might have a different approach, but I think that for our part, we want to make sure we pay people for what they're owed. Otherwise, it's not going to like that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you may have covered this, Jason, but as far as any potential additional pay issues with SAP, these grievances are just for ones that have occurred and those are settled. I mean, is there anything regarding future ones, or would they just be handled on a case-by-case basis?
Not at this point. I mean, I believe we still have one grievance in front of us, and as I said, I think it's a relatively minor one. I hope that we're getting to the point that, as errors occur, we will be able to fix them within the allotted time frame that we are allowed. But SAP.
Mr. Weddleton?
You know, and you could say, oh, it won't happen again, it was SAP, but, you know, there's hackers out there. And I think there's every likelihood that our system will ultimately be vulnerable and hacked. And we could face, what was Matsu, a month or so out of action? It was, you know, so we'd have the same thing. We'd be writing paper checks, they'd all be wrong. And if we're still open to these punitive penalties, we're in trouble.
I will add that one of the other aspects of, I think, some of the changes that were made, I think, address some of that, is that if it was, if there was some unintentional result that would happen, at least on some of these unions now, the penalty pay wouldn't take effect. So I would assume that something of that nature, at least on some of these agreements now, penalty pay wouldn't start accruing as a result of some type of hack.
Not based on what we read here, because this sets no precedence. I mean, this is totally independent from anything else that would go on in the world. So
Yes, but what I'm saying is that we have made other adjustments as we have renegotiated some of the
I've
CBAs
seen
to
that.
change the penalty pay language.
But I will say, is some of the concern about the vulnerability of PeopleSoft that pushed us into making the decision to go live with SAP. We had some assurances from SAP that the payroll was going to be bumpy. They have, what do they call it,
Implementation phase.
There's a transition period, which they didn't really tell us about until we went live. They just told you, you can expect things to be bumpy for 6 months to a year and a half. But we also faced costs had we not gone live. And so we took them at their word that this thing was going to be a little bit bumpy, but it would get around fairly quickly. But at the same time, there's an awareness that PeopleSoft had not been upgraded, that there were increasing concerns about its vulnerabilities. And so we were just in a place where we had a bad choice of overstrings.
I was there when that decision was made. I'm not procrastinating. I think at each moment we made the decision that had to be made.
I'm reiterating it because not everybody was there.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So could an agreement have been made ahead of time, like before SAP went into effect, that would have provided like a grace period, or would have, in the event that things went south, or, I mean, for future upgrades, shall we say?
I think that should be a topic of conversation in 30 years whenever the municipality needs to upgrade their software again. I think that should be something that everyone discusses.
Got it. So when Dick Cheney is back on the
Because
SL.
my understanding is that 30 years ago when PeopleSoft was implemented, we experienced some of the same bumpiness and pay issues that we were experiencing with SAP. So I don't think it's necessarily. I think everybody that switches payroll systems experiences some magnitude of bumpiness for a number of months after you implement.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Mr. Constant has joined us. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and close the work session.